Hello and welcome to the Cheese Room. Welcome along. We are here for this special Champions League show. I am your host, Becky, and tonight I have two fantastic guests to help me talk about the Champions League draw, which, for those of you that have seen it already, is quite favourable for Spurs. First of all, James, hello. How's your week been? You look very smart today, I have to say. Very smart.
Thank you. Got all dressed up for the Champions League draw, so I'm feeling good. Bit hungover. Been a good week. A lot of packing. I'm living out of boxes at the moment.
Right. Are you moving house? Is that what you're doing? Moving?
Oh yeah, I'm moving to uni, so.
Of course you are. Of course you are.
Stuff.
Exciting. Yes. And anyone who welcome along people in the chat as well before I come back to that after any GCSE results today, isn't it as well? Just remembered. Steve, hello. Caller tells us you had a chat with Paratici on Saturday at the Wolves game. Have you got any juicy transfer news, any nuggets to tell us about when you met him?
Yeah, I mean, he said it was lovely to meet me. That's about all he gave away. I said he's had a busy summer, and he just said it's going to continue to be busy. So watch his space. But unsurprisingly, he didn't give many tips to a bloke he just met in a car park and asked for a selfie. But we'll see what happens.
Did he not know who you are? I would have thought he would know who you are.
No, security didn't. So he tried to kick me off my own car.
Really?
I was leaning up against my car, so I didn't have the keys with me, and security came over and told me to get off it. I was like, it's literally my vehicle. Oh, it's fine. But
that's funny. Yeah, I think there'll be some. I think we're bringing somebody in. We'll talk about that later on. But yeah. So, usual bit of housekeeping, please. If you've joined us along, if you could hit the like button, please, and subscribe, that would really help us. Hello to everyone in the chat. I can see a few familiar names already. Adrian, Kerry, hello. A few others in there. Hi, John. If you put in your reaction to the draw as well, we'll kind of try and put those comments up, and we'll talk about them as well. Okay, without further ado, let's get on with it. So earlier this week, when as I said on Monday that I was going to be doing this Champions League show, I felt I needed to do some research, because those of you that know me well know my knowledge of teams outside of Spurs is awful. So I thought, well, what I'll do, best person to help me with is Jack. So I got Jack to help me, and he was sat on his computer and I was sat on my computer. And between us, we were kind of coming up with ideas of who it would be. And we've got kind of a few snippets of facts that we'll kind of drop in at some point this afternoon. So we went through all the kind of possible teams and different pots. And yeah, I've learned about Czech teams and I've learned about Croatian teams. And I've definitely done some learning this week, but it's been fab. But yeah, so just a quick reminder before we get going. And James has got this slide, if you can put it up. This is the knockout stages from last year. So it looks a little bit like a tennis timetable. It is actually, when me and Jack stumbled across this, we were like, oh, it looks like a tennis timetable, because it sort of says like 4-2 and 6-2 and things like that. But it is actually the first and second leg. So you can kind of see there the teams that kind of went through the group stages. And as we see there, Real Madrid beat Liverpool in the final. Hooray. So before the draw took place, these were our pots. So James, I think you've got the picture of the pots. So they were the pots. They were the teams that we were possibly going to be drawn against. So, James, did you have any kind of picks out of there that you were hopeful that Tottenham would get, or any that you were kind of not keen on Spurs getting?
I mean, I wanted to play some of the bigger teams, right? Because I think realistically, if you want to go far, you got to beat big teams. It's Spurs, so I'll always, watch them and be excited. But some teams excite you more to play than others, right? So, would have loved Ajax. Would have loved, Madrid as well. Or even PSG. A lot of the teams in the first pot are very good teams, but specifically those couple, to be honest.
Yeah. Steve, agree with that? Any ones that you were kind of keen on or keen to avoid?
Well, it depends what reasons. There's a couple of places I want to go travel. So I'm definitely going to go to the away games. That didn't work out too well for us when we go through the draw. But
yeah,
from a footballing sense, I didn't want to get Bayern because what they did to us was brutal. Obviously, you don't want to get PSG or Real Madrid. Pottery, Shakhtar was a team I really didn't want to get, just because what's happening in Ukraine, everybody's going to be supporting them, and people never support us anyway. So we'd definitely be the hated on team in that group. And then I didn't want to get anybody from Scotland because Caller said it earlier. It's West Ham syndrome, isn't it? It'd be the cup final to beat an English team. And we just know there's going to be tackles going in. Somebody's going to get injured. Somebody's going to get red carded. Didn't want that to happen. So, those are the teams I didn't want to happen.
Yeah, it's similar. I was the same. People were sort of saying, we want to get the big teams. And you kind of, you want the big teams and you want to do well. And I was thinking, no. Let's have a fairly straightforward journey because we never make things easy for ourselves anyway. And let the other teams kind of, knock out the bigger teams. So I was sort of like you said then, Steve, didn't really want to kind of play the Czech team. Madrid, Real Madrid, it would have been, it's been a great fixture down in the lane. But again, we didn't necessarily want that particular team. Porto would have been nice, I think. Napoli, there would be all those kind of connotations of Ndombele and all that sort of thing. But so I think, we could sit and do a whole show tonight over who we wouldn't wanted and who we didn't want. But if we could see the draw that we have been given, the group that we have got. So there we are. So Frankfurt were drawn out first, which because they went into pot 1 because they won the Europa League. And I was seeing HG tweeting yesterday, and he was saying all along that he wanted Frankfurt, and they were drawn out. And so we've got them. And then Sporting Lisbon, which is Sporting CP, I think I've learnt this week. And then we've got Olympique Marseille, who are the French team. So, James, first thoughts on that draw for the group stage we've been given?
Looks like a Europa League draw, doesn't it really? I mean, Frankfurt did well to win the Europa League last season, but they were playing like Rangers, so whatever. They finished 11th last season in the Bundesliga, so they weren't anywhere near European football. How much of that is because of the Europa League run? How much of that is because they were just like not very good last season? Hard to say. It could be kind of like when we got to the Champions League final, but we were bad in the league at the same time, and they might fall off massively this season. Because by no means are any of these games easy, but I think it's the easiest draw we could have got. Yeah.
And you just said then that they were 11th last year. They're 15th so far this season. They've only had 2 draws and a defeat. So they've even, like you said, is that you kind of hangover from it. I remember watching the final when they played Rangers on penalties, and I think a lot of people wanted obviously Rangers to do quite well, and the atmosphere at Frankfurt is going to be amazing. Steve, do you think the atmosphere at Frankfurt is going to be nuts, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. And, German football's amazing for atmosphere anyway. And I think even if HG was the only person in the stadium, I think the atmosphere would be pretty good. So I think it'll carry us along quite well. The one I'm really worried about is the atmosphere in Marseille, not so much in the stadium, but around it. That's probably the one game I'm not going to go to.
Right.
There's going to be trouble there. We saw it. Was that the Euros, wasn't it, a few years back? Marseille kicked off, so that's probably the one game I'm going to avoid. Overall, I think a good draw. But I love James. I respect James. But I fear, my friend, you are doing what all the other Spurs fans are doing, thinking it's a Europa League draw and we're going to walk it. There's some tough games there. Sporting are not a bad team. They finished second last year, I think. So they're going to be a challenge. At home, I'll be comfortable beating most of them, which should see us through the group with a draw or two. But the away games are going to be tough, I think. And the atmosphere, like you said, Becky, is going to be a big part of that.
Yeah. And we were saying before, me and James, before we went live, is earlier on, those of you that seen on Twitter, the Spurs account did like a kind of first of all, did like a rolling sort of roulette wheel thing, and then they did the countries that the cities that came up, and you had to kind of screenshot. And James, which one did yours land on?
Oh, it landed on Marseille.
Yeah, and mine landed on Lisbon, so that's a bit of a funny difference, isn't it? But yeah, I think I'm with Steve. I think we have to be very careful because we've been in this situation before when we've been bottom of groups and we've managed to kind of get through groups, and we never, like I said earlier at the show, we never make things easy for ourselves. Atmospheres in the Champions League are a different beast. Watching the Rangers game last night against PSV, the atmosphere, and they were saying in commentary, I think there was only 35,000 there, and the atmosphere was immense. Prior to kick-off, first sort of 20 minutes, and then kind of Rangers kind of played themselves into the game. So, they make it like, I know we're going to have some tifos and, they're going to be night games and there is going to be that element of it. But yeah, I think, I think we can't be complacent with any of the matches at all. Like you said there, Sporting Lisbon finished second. They've kind of started sort of patchy this season so far. They've had a win, a loss and a draw. But, I think they're nice cities to go to. I think I've seen a few people on Twitter so far that, saying kind of some of the journeys are not too far in terms of kind of, the fixtures that we've got either side that we'll come on to a little bit later in terms of who Spurs play. There was always that, kind of hangover from Champions League matches, and we'll kind of have a chat about that later on. But looking in kind of the chat, we've got kind of people saying the same sort of thing. It's not going to be a cakewalk. Different kind of players that have left Frankfurt. And, Kostic joined Juve. Yeah, it's going to be interesting. It's exciting. It is really exciting. Shall we talk through some of the other, before we come back to Spurs, shall we talk through some of the other notable kind of groups? The one that kind of jumped out for me was Lewandowski going back to Barcelona. So in Group C, we've got Bayern, Barca, Inter, and the Czech team. Pizen is I don't know how you pronounce it. So Lewandowski will be going back to Barcelona, back to Bayern. And then in Group G, we've got City, Sevilla, Dortmund and Copenhagen. So Haaland will be going back to Dortmund. Cue all the conspiracy theorists saying that the draw is rigged and it's all about that side of it. But yeah, so anybody, have you got the groups in front of you too? Any kind of notable fixtures that kind of jumped out at you, James?
I mean, you've got Bayern, Barca and Inter in the same group.
Yeah.
That's going to be entertaining. Liverpool, Ajax, Napoli, Rangers. I mean, Rangers are going to get spanked 6 times. That's going to be fun. Few of the other groups, Leipzig, Madrid, Shakhtar Donetsk, Celtic. I feel that's going to be a pretty comfortable group for Leipzig and Madrid. But we definitely could have got a much tougher draw. I think we should be thankful we got a moderate test. We got the intermediary test, not the ultra hard difficulty test. I'm glad about that at least. I don't know.
Yeah, and then you're saying there PSG and Juve, Benfica and Maccabi Haifa as well. There's some, kind of in terms of kind of travelling wise. Yeah, I know some of the Spurs fans are saying it would have been nice to play in Israel and have a fixture in Israel, but it's a long trek, isn't it? Kind of. The Leipzig, like you said, Leipzig, Madrid, Celtic, and the Shakhtar one. Shakhtar are going to be playing there because, as Steve said, the situation in Ukraine, they're going to be playing their home games in Poland. So again, kind of handy to kind of avoid having to go to Poland and back, when you've got fixtures on the weekend afterwards. But yeah, I was sat here kind of because I was literally having my Spurs nails done at like 5:15. Sat here, kind of quickly had the kind of the group on my phone, and I was eating some food, and then Dave texted me, as some of you know, he's a Liverpool supporter, and he was like, "Yeah, Spurs have got a great group." But yeah, we will see. Shall we have a look at the kind of the fixtures that kind of come up either side of the Champions League match days?
Is that the slide we're looking for?
Yeah, so that's when the fixtures will take place, and then I've got here on my run sheet. I'll go through some of the fixtures that go around either side. So so we've got Forest away on Sunday, and then we've got West Ham next week, which is their World Cup, isn't it? And their FA Cup each season, even though they're dreadful. Steve, are you going to West Ham? Are you going to West Ham Forest? Oh, is he frozen? Can you hear us, Steve?
Oh, you there, Steve?
Can you hear us? He's frozen.
Well,
he's frozen in time.
We'll give him a minute to sort himself out.
Yeah. And then after the Fulham game, which is on the Saturday, and that's the first game I'm going to the season without Jack, we've got match day 1, which I'm sure the comments will correct me if I'm wrong, but would Spurs play Frankfurt in that first one? Would that count? Is that how they work it out? Is that match day 1, or is there some fandangled thing I don't understand? But yeah, so that'll be match day 1, and then they play City on the following Saturday. So that's probably the one of the trickier matches to follow, Champions League game. But as we know, we take 6 points off City, don't we? Every week, every season.
Every season, even Nuno did.
And then match day 2 will be on the 13th or the 14th of September. And then they would play Leicester the following week. And then there's a kind of an international break. So although we've then, we've had kind of from next week, really, 2 fixtures a week, we've then got the international break. And as we've said on the regular shows, it's hoping that they all come back, isn't it, in one piece, and there aren't any kind of silly injuries picked up. I think it's an opportunity, certainly, possibly. I think Forest, we're going to have maybe a few kind of see some sort of rotation of the squad to get that kind of heavy fixture situation. And then after the international break, we've got the North London derby, which is on 12:30 on Saturday, 1st of October, which, again, players coming back from long distances, not ideal having the North London derby at 12:30. What are your views on putting the North London derby at 12:30, James?
Oh, that's horrible. I don't want to wake up at 12:30. God. Oh, no. Oh, evening kickoff. Because, look, and here's an unfortunate life lesson. If you go to the pub at 12:30, right, that's seen as a drinking problem. Whereas if it's at 5 o'clock, it's fine. So I'd much rather they put the game later on in the evening. So when I go to the pub to watch it with my Arsenal supporting friend, we aren't stared at judgmentally by people for being in the pub at 12 o'clock. Also, it's inconvenient for a lot of people, right? It's a lot easier, I think, to have later afternoon games because, you might have kids who are playing football, and from playing football for 9 years, those sorts of times are when it concludes or starts. So,
and the argument is that it's because it's a local derby, people are only coming from local distances. Isn't always the case now. So, some people have moved away from the area, and it's a long way. And I said on Monday, the early kickoffs do affect the atmosphere. I know that you would hope that would be different for the North London derby, but like not enough people have had enough time to have a few drinks, to kind of get in that kind of into their system. And it's unfortunate. You're back with us, Steve. You okay? You froze there a little bit.
Yeah. I made bets all over the show today. Apologies.
Yeah. If anyone can see, I'm squinting, and it's good at the moment. I'm shrunken in the left-hand side. I can barely see anything because the sun is shining into my kitchen, and I'm sitting there. Normally, I'll be sat over with sunglasses on. But we were just saying before you went, Steve, are you going to the Forest and the away games? Are you going to Forest and West Ham?
So am I going to Forest? No, I'm not going to Forest, but HG will be going to Forest on my behalf.
Oh, good.
West Ham, I may go to. I haven't really thought that through yet, to be honest.
It's not the most enticing away game, I think. I just think it's not somewhere I really want to go to watch a match, really. Not because of the rivalry, just because of the state of the fact that it's not built for football. It's an athletic stadium. Yeah,
and also with the rivalry, I mean, I'm a lover, not a fighter. Like, I wouldn't do well in a fight, particularly against West Ham firms. I think those types of events I'm best keeping well away from.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going through the fixtures. So we've got as far as City, and then obviously when we know all of this and it's all been, we will kind of give you an updated list of when the different fixtures fit in the match days and everything. But just like I said, it's very fresh, isn't it? So after the Arsenal game, there'll be match day 3, and that follows with Brighton, which is fairly straightforward for a Champions League fixture. It's not too far to Brighton. And then we've got match day 4, and then we've got Everton at home. Then we've got United away, which is nothing else but for TV because it's an 8:15 kickoff. I think it's on Amazon Prime, that one. But yeah, for those, for people coming from the southeast to get to that fixture is ludicrous. But anyway, and then they've got Newcastle. And then this is the game that I've put in on the run sheet. It's got big asterisks next to it. Hopefully it is a home draw, because if it's a home draw, it's half term. It means me and Jack can go to a Champions League game together at Spurs. So half term for us is the 25th and 26th of October. It may already be out there in the ether, I don't know. But yeah, if that's a home game, hopefully we'll be at that one. And then that is followed by Bournemouth away. So again, the fixtures have kind of fallen, that there isn't this great amount of travelling sort of between either the Premier League fixtures that follow the Champions League matches or the Champions League matches themselves. Then there's match day 6, and then they've got Liverpool. And hopefully by then we are not already knocked out and in the Europa League. So the Liverpool fixture will follow match day 6. And then for those of you that are clued up on your fixtures, we play Forest the following week because we drew them last night in the Carabao Cup away at Forest. And I thought I'd wear my 1991 kit when we beat them in the FA Cup. And there we go. And that's kind of, and I know on the screen you've got there the fixtures as they continue on. I hope Spurs are involved in. But if they're not in the Champions League, those fixtures, those dates will sort of fall in line with the Europa League as well, won't they? So yeah, so James, could you put the group back up on the screen for us, if that's right?
Of course.
There might be people coming in from work and things like that.
Well, we've got the banner at the bottom, so.
Yes, we have. And I felt like we needed to put some music. Obviously, we're coming in as well. I've seen lots of tweets today about how we play football on a Wednesday night. Most notably, we didn't see Arsenal, did we, in that draw? What night do they play on? Remind me, it's Thursday, isn't it? Thursday.
Yeah, where are Arsenal? I was told they were a big team by people on Twitter, yet they weren't in the draw.
No. And West Ham playing tonight as well. And if things go badly there, they might get knocked out as well in their strongest season ever last season. But yeah, so like we said, Frankfurt, Tottenham, Sporting Lisbon, and Marseille. I know he's not Spurs anymore, but Dele today's gone to Besiktas. What do we think about that, James?
Dreadful how a player who was so talented. I remember in the season where he scored, I think, 18 goals. He's one of the top goal scorers in the league, in a side where Harry Kane scored nearly 30 goals in the Premier League. And he was 20, 21. Such a shame his career has gone downhill so significantly. It's sad. I don't think it was for lack of trying on his behalf. I think his mental was just a bit lost. Maybe he can find it in Turkey, away from cameras and media, but it's not what you want to see. I was hoping by this time in his career, 5-6 years ago, there'd be Ballon d'Or shouts for him, and he'd be an England guaranteed 11 player. But it's disappointing. I hope he can find some semblance of form out there and maybe make his way back into Europe. Well, it was quite Europe proper.
It was a kind of a strange coincidence today that this all day I feel like I've been seeing reruns of Champions League goals, and I've seen goals at Wembley, and he was in a lot of those goals, and he was really kind of involved in that. And I remember going to the Ghent game and he got sent off, and that is the day that he then he's gone to Besiktas, and it's a tricky one because, like you just said, that kind of 2 or 3 years he was outperforming in terms of stats for assists, and the age that he was at, and kind of the world was completely his oyster, that the transfer fees that were being bandied about and all this, and he just looked so happy. And then today we're back in the Champions League draw after 2-year absence, and Dele goes to Turkey, which there's I can think of 1 or 2 players that have gone to Turkey and then have gone and returned back to the Premier League, but it's very, very rare, isn't it? They go to Turkey, and that's kind of almost that. And then you've got MLS after that, haven't you? So Steve, what's your take on the whole Dele thing?
I feel bad for him, like everybody else. I think, I was excited by him. Like, he was outperforming everybody. He's got, I can't remember how many league goals he got for us now, but it's over 50, which for his age was, just incredible. And he just looked, he was playing with confidence. He looked like a great player. And like over the years, I've spoken to quite a few people at Spurs about him, on like the coaching staff and managerial staff, and nobody can quite work out what's gone wrong with him. His head just went. But he's, I think I'm right in saying he's the only ex-Tottenham player to serve the photo up in the lodge. So the players loved him, and everybody I speak to at Spurs just really wants him to do well. And they tried so hard with him, and he just couldn't get it. And he had that, it was a couple of years ago when he spent the entire summer was it in Dubai or something, and everything on Instagram was him in the gym with a trainer, getting really fit, trying his best. So I don't think it's a lack of effort. I think it's just head went. He had a rough upbringing, got a lot of money and a lot of fame very quickly, and I think it just turned him. And he hasn't quite recovered. His career's stalled. But yeah, good luck to the lad. And his greeting at the airport was epic. I don't know if anybody's seen that. If not, have a look at it on Twitter or YouTube or whatever. It's a good epic. Good intro for him.
Yeah, I saw the video. He looked very happy and he was kind of waving his arms, wasn't he, and doing this sort of thing. It's just, I remember seeing the handshake with Lampard when he went to Everton, and that was a funny one as well. And it's I think, like we said, we want him to do well, and we hope he does well. And like you said, Steve, I know Dyer still speaks to him frequently, and he went to Davis's wedding, and he's still kind of very close with the players that are still here. So yeah, it's a funny one. I know we're kind of jumping around a bit, but I'm conscious that some people may be coming in from work and catching the show because it's not at its normal time. So we're kind of doing things in a slightly jumpy round order tonight, but it's just so that people can kind of come in and join us. While I say that, there's 51 of you watching. If you wouldn't mind hitting the like button for us, please, that would be fantastic. John has just reliably informed us that West Ham are winning 1-0, so chances of them getting knocked out in the Europa League qualifying is probably non-existent, but anyway, we can hope.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. Okay, right. So let's go back to the Champions League draw. So, like I said, Spurs have got Frankfurt, Lisbon, and Sporting Lisbon and Marseille. Looking at the other draw, James, who's your sort of either you kind of the group that you think is maybe not from Spurs being one of the easier groups, but a group that you possibly think is a tricky group, or have you got a particular team that you think will do well? I know when I asked Jack this question, he thinks that Inter Milan will do well. He thinks they're the strongest team in the little pot that they will. So who have they got? Where have they gone? Inter. So they've got Bayern, Barca, and the Czech team. So possibly now, he hasn't seen the draw yet, but when I tell him, he'll probably change his mind. What do you think? What do you think about possible?
I think Ajax have real potential to dominate their group. They are a pot one team, though. I will say, on the BBC website, it lists Group A as Liverpool first, despite them being in pot 2. But for Spurs' group, it lists Frankfurt as being first. So anti-Tottenham bias at the BBC.
Yeah, I agree. Exactly. I've written it down in that order. I've written down Liverpool, Ajax, Napoli, and Rangers. Yeah, as it came out that way.
Group A is going to be really exciting because you've got 3 teams who play very aggressive, progressive football, right? That kind of attacking style. Group C, Bayern, Barca, Inter. It's the main teams. Barca aren't great at the moment, and Lewandowski gets to go back to Bayern. I think that's a strange one from Barca. Bayern are in kind of a transitionary period. I don't think they're quite as good as people think they are. Even when they beat us 7-2, like 3 or 4 of the goals came in the last 10 minutes when we basically already lost. It wasn't as dominant a performance as a lot of people think it was in their memories. They just see the scoreline. Looking at the other groups, I don't know. I think they're all pretty balanced. I don't see any groups where I think, crikey, one team is just going to get decimated. I mean, aside from maybe Group A, because I don't think Rangers have very much to compete against Liverpool, Ajax, and Napoli. But then again, in their home games, I'm sure they'll be able to put up a performance. Same with a lot of these teams, right? Like in their home fixtures, they'll be able to get something. Yeah,
the thing that surprised me doing the research this week with Jack is that Napoli, they came 3rd last season, but already they've had 2 wins. So they may be, like you said, in that group, you've got Liverpool, Ajax, you've got Rangers. Napoli may do better than maybe than, I don't know, Liverpool aren't doing particularly well. I'm not standing there saying that they won't. They like Champions League nights. It's kind of what Anfield is all about. But, it possibly Napoli would kind of pip Ajax. I'm similar to you. I'm looking at them here and thinking, normally you sort of see the 2 strong teams and then you sort of see everything. But here you're looking at them thinking, actually, there's 3 fairly decent teams, I suppose, with the expansion to the Europa Conference League and that kind of the way the money has kind of fallen down the pyramid a little bit. It is making those kind of teams that are coming into it a little bit stronger than maybe we would have anticipated. I know when I was looking last night, but the Bodo Glimt, they could have got through, and I will see them as being in the Europa League. Or teams. So, that kind of those teams that we would normally see as Europa League teams moving into the kind of Champions League makes the draw look tricky to kind of pick those two teams that would come out of the group stage. Like the Group F, you've got Leipzig, Madrid, Shakhtar and Celtic. I think I agree with Steve. The whole Shakhtar thing is going to be tricky. They're going to be playing in Poland. It's, but Celtic, again, they like Champions League nights, and would they be the team, or would they, do as they've done recently and kind of finish fourth each time? So it's quite interesting. But just going back to Kerry's put in the tweet in the comments, have we got any particular players that are dangerous? So that was one of the things that Jack and I did earlier in the week. We kind of went through all of the teams in the pots, and we kind of tried to come up with teams and then players that would be dangerous for us. So if I go to my
Kane, Son, Kulusevski are probably the top three.
Yeah, absolutely. And then Romero, Bentancur. Yeah, absolutely.
You value your shin's integrity, Romero.
Yeah. And aren't they going to be players that are going to like those kind of Champions League nights, in the lights at the Lane? I think, even people like Davis who've been involved in it before, Dyer's been involved in it before, Lloris has, and Mora, it's gonna be such a night. And then you've got the newer players that are kind of coming through. I saw on Twitter yesterday Basuma doing some training. Wowzers, I was exhausted watching it. So yeah, it's exciting. But yeah, if we kind of look at Frankfurt, the players I picked out, and these are just, and it shows that when I'm on the show on a Monday, I do listen very intently to HG, because when I was looking at the lineups, there were certain players that were kind of coming out, and I said, I've heard of him, and that's because HG has mentioned him. So I kind of picked out Ndika, Lindstrom, and then somebody called RSB Maori, and I just thought that was a really cool name. But yeah, so James, have you got any kind of players for Sporting Lisbon that possibly we need to look out for?
Oh, Sporting Lisbon. Not off the top of my head. I have a few at Marseille I can talk about.
Marseille? Yeah.
Okie dokie. Firstly, Milik. Played in Italy for a while. I know because I managed Marseille on Football Manager for a while. He's a really good player. He scored about 16 goals or so for them in the league last season. Great player. I didn't realise until I looked it up. Marseille have signed Alexis Sanchez. Do you remember him? So they've definitely got some good attacking options. Milik is definitely one to look out for. He's a proper poacher striker. In regards to Frankfurt, they've got a guy I managed on Football Manager, Kolo Muane. I don't know if he's any good in real life, but he's very good on Football Manager. So he's definitely one to look out for. Marseille will definitely pose an attacking threat. They've also got Eric Bailly on loan from Man U. So a bit of an interesting collection of players, but Milik's a good player. We should watch out for him in particular, I think.
Yeah, Steve, have you got any players that we need to kind of look out for in any of the teams?
So at Sporting, I don't know how you pronounce it. Portuguese is terrible, but Trincao, however you pronounce it.
Trincao, I think, yeah.
Absolute quality. He's very tricky. He's a type of player I can see, dare I say it, somebody like Romero lunging in on and getting a yellow or two. So him to look out for. But I think we're probably up against teams who don't have many standout players, but are pretty consistent across the board as teams to play against. And those can be the trickier ones to beat because if you don't have a star player or two, then you're less reliant on them. So I think Trincao for Sporting certainly. And is it Sporting Lisbon or was it Sporting Club de Portugal? Because I was in Lisbon in June, and I said one of them, and I got told off by a lot of Portuguese people.
Yeah, because I thought it was Sporting Lisbon, and interesting, like we said, going back to what Spurs tweeted about the thing, it definitely said Lisboa, so it is in Lisbon. And then when I was doing the research with Jackie, went, they're called Sporting CP. And I went, oh, it's probably just a sponsor's name, like RB Leipzig and RB Salzburg. And I said, that's possibly what the different letters were. But yeah, when the draw came out, it said Sporting CP. So
I think there's maybe we need, well, if somebody knows in the chat, let us know. But there's something about that. So something very territorial where I think Sporting are not technically in Lisbon. I think they're in a suburb of Lisbon. That's a bit like Arsenal are from Woolwich, right? So I think they're Woolwich rather than Lisbon. So it's something like that.
Okay, interesting.
Chat.
Like I said at the top of the show, I have never learned so much about European football teams as I have this week. It's been like mind-boggling. James, you want to say something?
I have an interesting one from my 30-second research of Sporting Lisbon. Going to be honest, don't watch a lot of Portuguese football. Sorry, Portugal. They've got a guy, Francisco Trincao. I'm going to angered someone. So he's a Barcelona player. He's on loan there. He was on loan at Wolves last season, so you may have seen. Doesn't seem particularly prolific though, because he scored 2 goals last season. But Barca spent 30 million euros on him, so they've obviously seen something in this guy. So who knows? Maybe this will be his breakout season, and we should watch out for him. Or he'll be terrible because Barcelona spend money on bad players. But there you go, 6 foot tall winger, and he gets Portugal caps, so they obviously reckon he's decent. So they've obviously got a couple of tricky players. Yeah, it's definitely Sporting CP or Sporting Lisbon, but they finished second last season in the league. So I think ahead of Benfica, right? Because I think Porto won the league. So they're obviously a pretty decent team to be getting into those positions. They got some players I recognise, actually.
I recognised Paulinho, but then I thought, I don't think it's the same Paulinho
that Portuguese one. Unless they're playing Paulinho in an attacking position, which would be interesting. I mean, we forget Paulinho left Spurs, he ended up in China, and then Barcelona signed him. That has to be one of the strangest signings I've seen.
Which is why...
I think we lost Becky.
Oh, losing everything.
Lost me earlier. It's round robin. One thing I didn't realise, and thank you, Wikipedia, my knowledge isn't as good. Sporting Stadium's 50k.
Crikey.
So it's a bit bigger than I thought.
Oh, I just realised that they also have Marcus Edwards.
Yes. Someone put that on Twitter. Is that who they were talking about?
Yeah. The Spurs lad. Yeah. He scored in the 21-22 season. He scored 7 goals in 17 games in the league. Crikey. So, a warm welcome for him at White Hart Lane.
Yeah, absolutely.
A cold welcome, if he scores, at least.
I must admit, when we talked earlier about who we would like or who we wouldn't have liked, I would have liked to have had Benfica. It would have been nice to have Vertonghen back at the Lane and see him. And he's not played it. They've not drawn anybody like Celtic or Rangers, so he's not, or any of the other English teams. But yeah, it'd be nice to see Jan Vertonghen. But my kind of dark horse for it, for the title, unfortunately, is Bayern. I think now they've got Mane and they're scoring for fun, aren't they, in the league? I noticed they won, was it 7-something the other day? And Dave was telling me, because he'd heard something about that, apparently one of the goals was disallowed for Mane because he told the ref that he'd handballed it first, and then they didn't give it, but he still scored a hat-trick. So, I know we've talked before on here that the Bundesliga isn't the same standard. You see that with kind of some of the other German teams, but I just think, I remember when we were in Turkey, it was 2010, we were in Turkey, and we were lucky enough to go to Turkey in the middle of all the COVID red zone business, and we watched the Champions League final, the one kind of behind closed doors, and it was PSG, wasn't it, and Bayern, and luckily Bayern did all the normal football fans a favour by not allowing the kind of oil-rich teams to kind of come in and take the Champions League. Because as I was saying to Jack when we were doing the research, I still forget that City and PSG haven't won the Champions League. I know we haven't in kind of the sense, but it just baffles me that it's that elusive situation that, I think they've got Haaland now, City, and PSG has still got Mbappe, but yeah, that season when Bayern Munich won it, I think it was a good thing for the normal football fan, and I just think that Bayern will still again be a kind of strong team.
Do you know what? I'm going to be a contrarian. I'm not sure how good Bayern actually are at this point. Do you know? They're playing the league where they're not faced with much competition. Oh, bye, Steve. Steve really didn't like that opinion, did he? Blimey. He's a secret Bayern agent. Right, let's get Steve.
Back again.
Hi, Steve.
Everything good?
Yeah, James, you were saying that you don't think it's Bayern to beat.
No, certainly not. I I'm not the biggest Nagelsmann fan, just for one, as a broad statement. They've been very dominant in the league basically since Klopp left, or since Guardiola came effectively. But the thing is, they've had a drop-off in points. So if you look at a graph, their points have been trailing down. They haven't won the Champions League for years. They've lost Robert Lewandowski. They brought in Mane, which I think is a good addition, but he's not the same player. He's not the same kind of goal scorer. Their squad is typically aging as well. I don't think they're the team to beat. I also don't think Real Madrid are the team to beat either, for separate reasons. They won it last year with a lot of luck, let's be honest, again, particularly against Chelsea and City. They got very lucky. And because Benzema was overperforming expected goals, now he's back to underperforming expected goals. You know, it's just because he had a magnificent, season. He had a late renaissance, which that won't happen again. They're not going to be a team to beat either. Their midfield's very old. They lost Casemiro to Man U, which is a weird signing, which is a weird thing for Casemiro to do. So I think they're going to be a lot weaker. I also think Bayern are going to be weaker for losing Lewandowski. I think it's going to be an English club to win it.
Steve, what do you think? Oh, he's frozen again.
Oh. Steve's just in disbelief at my opinion, evidently. Oh, no, he left again.
No, he's gone together. James, can you put up the Spurs' group for those people who've joined us from work and things? So those of you who have not seen it.
By the way, guys, if you look at the bottom of the screen, the banner, that's our group. But got it on screen as well.
Yeah, so Frankfurt, Sporting and Marseille. And for those of you that weren't with us at the start, Steve was saying that he thinks, as a few people have said already, that there's some good away games there. Frankfurt's a nice city, Lisbon, but Marseille's a bit of a tasty atmosphere.
I think they were the first ever French champions of Europe. I think they might have the most successful European history in Europe, Marseille, for a French team, at least.
Good stat. Hello, Steve. We were just saying about who we think are the dark horses to win it, and James was disagreeing with me. He doesn't think it'd be Bayern.
I don't think Bayern. I'm really going to go on a limb here. I think PSG.
Oh.
Now, it depends what PSG turns up, or indeed what characters turn up in the individual games, because we all know that they're not a team, they're individuals, but on their day, they can beat anybody, and they'll get through the group stage. So, I think they've got a good chance. But it's going to be kind of, flip of a coin, I think, whether they win a game or say they could win a game 4-0, they could lose a game 4-0. But I think PSG. I'll disagree with James. I think Real have got to be up there. They've won is it 5 out of the last 9 times?
Yeah, I think, yeah.
So you can't discredit them. I don't think Liverpool are going to be there this year. I think they'll do well, but I don't think they'll be there. I don't think we'll be there. City, lol, just no. Chelsea, it's going to be difficult to win it without any strikers. So I don't think any of the British clubs will really be there. Or English clubs, I should say. And clearly Celtic and Rangers aren't going to get out of group stage. So I think PSG or Real.
Yeah. Put in the chat, guys, what you think as well. I've seen a few people saying just not City. Put in who you think could be certainly kind of semi-final, kind of final. I think looking at the kind of, and obviously we said before about Liverpool have had a bit of a patchy start. Interestingly, we haven't mentioned Chelsea at all. I don't think Chelsea's group is particularly complicated with Milan, Salzburg, and Zagreb. Some tasty atmospheres there. I think maybe if the atmosphere kind of has something to do with it. But you would think we're hearing every day almost that Chelsea are buying somebody else and for paying over quoted at over 60 million for Gordon is just crazy. Astronomical. So you'd think that if the players that they've got probably do enough to get them out of the group. So City's group: Seville, Dortmund, Copenhagen.
I I think there'll be a big team, and by big team, you know, I mean the Bayerns, the Chelsea, unfortunately, the Reals, those sorts of guys. One of the big 8, 9, 10 teams. One of those guys. I think one of them is going to have a bad group stage because of one of the third, fourth pot teams, like a Salzburg, who played out a Red Bull style of football. It's very aggressive, very high pressing. It's going to catch them out, and they're going to drop into the Europa League. And I think that's going to make the Europa League incredibly interesting because you can have some big team name matchups in the later rounds of the Europa League, which is going to make that a worthwhile watch. That's my hot take. Not very hot, but I think that's quite likely to occur.
Yeah, we said before, didn't we, earlier in the show, that normally you kind of look at the groups and you sort of see the 2 that would get out of it. And I'm looking at now, you know, there's some teams where you're thinking, well, there's 3 teams there could easily kind of, you know, have performances against each other. You know, looking at Group B, you've got Atletico Madrid, you've got Porto, Leverkusen, and Bruges. You would assume it would be Atletico and Leverkusen, then maybe Porto. You know, it's interesting. It's going to be interesting. That, you know, we haven't talked much about Juve either. You know, Juve kind of a kind of strong. More recently in kind of in Champions League, I know they've not got Ronaldo anymore, and they haven't got Kulusevski and Bentancur, and but you know, we haven't kind of mentioned Juventus either. We talked about Benfica, and then obviously Maccabi Haifa is kind of a sort of a bit of an unknown, I think, certainly at this stage. But yeah, so just this point, we've got 71 people watching. If you could hit the like, that would be fantastic. Just a little bit of things to remind you of. We've got the normal show on Friday where we will be previewing the Forest away game. And then we've got Monday's show, which will obviously review how Forest went. And then we've got Wednesday night, we've got the West Ham game, haven't we? So on Friday, we'll talk about the West Ham game. And certainly kind of more kind of Champions League sort of follow-ups and bits and pieces, and kind of going from there, all kind of before the Fulham game, which, you know, nice London derby at 3 o'clock kickoff, which is a good one as well. But yeah, so I'd just like to say thank you everyone for kind of joining us this kind of extra 6 o'clock show to talk about the Champions League. It's fantastic to be playing on a Wednesday night again.
And Tuesdays.
And Tuesdays, of course. But certainly not on Thursday night. So Steve, thanks very much for joining me.
Very welcome.
And James, thanks for all the techie bits as usual, and the button pressing and stuff and all of that.
Delightful to be on as ever. Tremendous hosting, Becky. Lovely to see you again, Steve.
Yeah,
your beautiful face. Thank you to everyone.
And yeah, so we will, like I said, we're back on Friday reviewing previewing, wrong word, for the Forest game. So that'll be fantastic. And Spurs are back in the Champions League. Come on, you Spurs.
Come on, you Spurs.